I paid $83,000 for my daughter's dream wedding, then got seated near the toilet. No speech. No dance. Just silence. So I smiled, canceled everything, and uncovered a secret buried 29 years. What I found shattered everything they thought they knew. I used to believe that if you gave everything, your time, your energy, your heart, people would see you. They'd know what you sacrificed. They'd remember who stood behind them when no one else did. I don't believe that anymore. My name is Helen Monroe. I'm 58 years old. I've lived in Savannah, Georgia, all my life. The house I'm in now, it's the same one I moved into after I got married at 23. Back then, I thought I had everything figured out. My husband, Thomas, was strong, quiet, and always carried the kind of sadness you don't ask about. I thought love would fix that. I thought having a child would fix that. But he died when our daughter, Alina, was only 2. Just a heart attack in the night, gone before the ambulance even arrived. I didn't have time to grieve. I had a toddler in diapers and bills piling up. I got a job at the public school library, worked weekdays, and took weekend shifts at the county bookstore just to make ends meet. I wasn't bitter. Not yet. I believed in the story I told myself every morning before I put on my shoes. That this was for her. That everything would be worth it because she would have more. And Alina? She was smart. Beautiful. She learned to read early, danced in her room like no one was watching, and used to call me her brave bear. That's what she'd whisper when she curled into me during storms. "You're my brave bear, Mama." I used to carry those words like armor. They kept me warm on the coldest days. I missed a lot of things other mothers didn't: field trips, bake sales, soccer games, because I was always working. But I made sure she had new shoes each fall. That there was always dinner, always light in the fridge, even if there wasn't always light in me. When she went to college on scholarship, I cried for a week. Not because I was sad, but because I thought maybe, finally, I'd done something right. Years passed. She started working for a fashion brand in Atlanta, came home less and less, but when she did, she looked polished. Perfect. Her hair slicked back like a magazine editor, always talking about concepts and aesthetics, and how certain things were elevated. I didn't always understand her world, but I tried. I asked questions. I offered to visit. But there was always a reason why now wasn't the right time. Then one day, she called me, voice high with excitement. She was getting married. His name was Joshua. Tech consultant, family from Chicago. I said congratulations, asked when I'd get to meet him. She said soon. That was almost a year before the wedding. She called back a few days later, said they were touring venues. Everything was more expensive than they thought. I asked her how much they were budgeting. She hesitated, then said the number like it hurt, $83,000. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my first house didn't cost that much. But then I said I'd help. That's the part one can't stop replaying. I said I'd help. No one asked me to pay for it all, not directly. But every time something ran over budget, every time they wanted to upgrade, there I was with my checkbook. Cake tiers went from 2 to 5. Invitations went from printouts to hand-lettered custom ones from some artist in Vermont. The venue moved from a church hall to a lakeside lodge with glass floors and floating candles. Joshua's parents never offered a dime. Not once. I told myself it didn't matter. That this was my gift to Alina. That it would be her fairy tale. I should have known something was off when I wasn't asked to help plan anything. No dress shopping, no cake tasting. Every time I offered, she said things like, "Oh, Beverly's handling that," or "We want it to be a surprise, Mom." Beverly, as in Joshua's mother. The one with the pearl earrings and thin smile who treated me like I was someone who dropped in from the bus station. I met her once before the wedding. She shook my hand like she didn't want to touch it. Still, I kept paying. I wrote checks and told myself it was for Alina. That she'd remember. That she'd see me. The wedding was in mid-June. Hot, sticky Savannah heat. I arrived early wearing a soft mauve dress I had saved for months to buy. I'd even gotten my hair done that morning, 3 hours in a chair, pretending this day would matter for me too. When I got to the venue, no one greeted me. No one handed me a program or showed me to my seat. I found a young woman carrying a clipboard. I gave her my name. She blinked, then pointed toward the side hallway near the restrooms. "You're seated just over there, ma'am." I followed the direction and stopped cold. It wasn't the reception hall. It wasn't near anything. It was beside the toilet area, a folding chair next to the janitor's closet. A paper napkin had been tossed on the seat like an afterthought. I could hear the music and laughter through the thin wall. I could smell disinfectant and damp towels. I stood there for a while, confused. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they hadn't finished setting up. I walked back to the planner and asked again. That's when the catering intern, just a kid, stepped in. Oh, the bride mentioned something about visual consistency. Said this was best for the photos. Minimalist aesthetic or something. I didn't speak. I didn't scream or cry or throw my shoes. I just nodded, went back to the chair, sat down. My legs ached in that position. My dress bunched under me. My view. A rusted cart of mops and a leaking bucket. I didn't get a speech. I didn't get a dance. I didn't get one look from my daughter as she twirled under the fairy lights. Later that night, in the cheap motel I was staying at, because there wasn't room in the hotel block, I sat on the edge of the bed in silence. The air conditioner rattled, loud and clunky. My dress was still on, wrinkled, my feet swollen. And that's when I made the first call. Then the second. Then the third. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just said the same thing 3 times, clear and cold. Cancel the brunch. Cancel the band's second set. Cancel the premium liquor order. No refunds were needed. No explanations were given. Just my voice, even uncertain. I had stayed quiet long enough. But that was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I hadn't really slept, just lay there, staring at the flickering motel ceiling, listening to the old fridge hum and buzz. My mouth was dry. My back ached. The scent of kitchen grease still clung to my hair. The same hair I'd paid $85 to get styled the day before. I sat up slowly, every movement stiff. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, messages piling up like traffic. I didn't check them right away. I already knew what they were: confusion, irritation, questions from Alina, probably Joshua too. People wanting to know why the band didn't show up for the late set, why the brunch was canceled, why the bar closed early. I didn't answer. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. I got up, ran water from the sink until it turned warm, and splashed my face. My eyes looked older overnight. The mascara had smudged under them, making me look like a woman who'd cried. But I hadn't. Not a single tear. I felt hollow, like something had been scooped out of me. I packed slowly, folded my dress, tucked my heels into a plastic bag. I left the room neat, like I was raised to do, even though no one would notice. At the front desk, the clerk asked if everything had been okay with my stay. I smiled and said, "Perfect." It wasn't until I got home that the real weight hit me. I sat at my kitchen table, looked around the quiet house. Same furniture. Same walls. Everything just as it had been before I left. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't the same woman who had left to attend her daughter's wedding. That woman had believed she mattered. After I unloaded my suitcase, I walked into the bedroom to put away a few papers. That's when I noticed the drawer in my nightstand wouldn't close all the way. I knelt beside it and gave it a push, and something caught. A folder, thin, red, tucked away in the back. I pulled it out. At first, I thought it was just old tax paperwork or insurance forms. But inside was something different. A sealed document. My name on the corner. Thomas's signature faintly visible through the paper. I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened it. The words swam at first. Legal language, dense paragraphs. But then I saw it, my name, his name, and one more. Alina. It was an adoption record. My heart started pounding in my chest, dull and heavy. The document said that Alina had been left at the hospital as a newborn. That Thomas had signed adoption consent forms under emergency circumstances. That he told the court she was biologically his. But she wasn't. I blinked hard, the edges of the page blurring. I remembered that day, when Thomas came home with her. He said her mother couldn't keep her. That it was from a relationship before we met. I was so young. So unsure. And I loved him. I believed him. I said yes. I said, "We'll raise her together." He never mentioned a court. Never said she wasn't his either. I raised that girl. Held her through fevers. Fed her when she was sick. Stayed up all night sewing a costume for a school play. I took on extra shifts to buy her a prom dress she only wore once. I stood in line in the rain so she could get the newest book she wanted. And none of it was built on blood. It was built on love. That part didn't hurt me. Not really. What hurt was realizing that she must have known, or at least suspected. And still, she had treated me like an extra. Like I was just a wallet with legs and a last name. Like I didn't matter. I placed the file on the table and went to make a cup of coffee. I didn't cry. I just moved, quiet and automatic. Later that afternoon, I logged into my banking app. I didn't know why. Maybe to check the deposits, to remind myself how much I'd given. And that's when I saw it. 2 new charges. one from a yacht rental company, one from a custom tailoring service in Chicago. Combined, they were over $2,000. Both posted 3 days before the wedding. Both on my card. I clicked into the details, my pulse rising. The tailoring service listed luxury groom and groomsmen fittings. The yacht company said pre-wedding celebration June 11th. My name. My money. Not even a mention to me. I scrolled back further. There was a brunch at a downtown restaurant. 8 people, high-end cocktails, seafood, dessert. A note on one of the digital receipts said Jay's treat, thanks to Helen. I sat there in silence. My coffee went cold. They had used me. Not just for the wedding, but for the fun before it. The show. The extras. The part they'd remember when they looked back and said, "Wasn't that the perfect day?" Perfect. And I was the one left by the toilets, with a paper napkin and a slice of cake I didn't even eat. I stood up, pacing now. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Not from sadness. It was anger. Clean and sharp. I opened the cabinet above the fridge, pulled out a photo album. The one with all the school pictures. Alina with her gap-toothed smile, Alina with a ribbon for science fair, Alina at graduation. Me, always behind the camera. I flipped through slowly, one page at a time. Then I took them out. Carefully. Gently. One by one. I didn't tear them. I just placed them in a box. Not because I hated her, but because I needed space. Space to see my own face again. That evening I made a list. A real one. On paper. Of all the people who had ever seen me, not just looked at me, but really seen me. Margie from the flower shop. She used to sneak me extra stems when I couldn't afford full bouquets. Ray, my next-door neighbor, who always brought in my trash bins without being asked. Ms. Torres at the library. We'd shared coffee breaks, late-night shelving stories, and sometimes silence when words weren't needed. Janelle from the community kitchen, who always said, "Helen, sit down. I'll do the cleaning this time." They weren't family by blood, but they were mine. I called each of them. Invited them to dinner the following weekend. Told them to come hungry. Told them to bring nothing but themselves. I didn't explain why. I didn't need to. I spent the next day deep cleaning. Not because I had to, but because I wanted a fresh start. I changed the tablecloth. Washed every dish by hand. Lit candles just to see them flicker. And then I turned off my phone. Let them call. Let them wonder. Let them finally notice the silence where I used to be. I had nothing left to explain. Nothing left to apologize for. I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. Because now, I was finally looking at myself. The house was quieter than I'd ever known it to be. Not empty, no, it didn't feel like that, but quiet in a way that felt chosen. Like a breath finally exhaled after years of being held in. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for a call or a knock or a "Mom, I need something." I didn't even glance at the phone. I had turned it off, and it was going to stay that way for a while. I spent the rest of the week preparing for dinner. Not because I had to, not out of duty, but because I wanted to. I wanted these people who'd seen me, really seen me, to feel welcome. I ironed the sunflower-printed tablecloth I'd found at the discount store years ago and never used. I bought a string of warm fairy lights and hung them along the porch. I went to the local farmer's market early Saturday morning and picked up fresh basil, cherry tomatoes, and a loaf of rosemary bread that still smelled like the oven. I made lemon butter pasta with garlic and herbs, a strawberry tart for dessert, and roasted vegetables with sea salt. Simple food, nothing fancy. But it was mine. Made with my hands for my table. No caterer. No aesthetic consultant. No one to tell me where I belonged in the picture. That night they arrived one by one. Margie brought red wine and a bunch of daisies. "You look beautiful, Helen," she said, hugging me tight. Ray showed up with his famous cheese dip and a tired old joke about how he almost forgot his pants. Ms. Torres came with a bag of loose tea leaves and hugged me like she knew something was wrong, even if she didn't say it. Janelle showed up last, all warmth and energy, her hands full of extra napkins and candles. The backyard glowed under the string lights. The table was mismatched, some chairs with cushions, some without, but it didn't matter. We ate, we laughed, and we told stories that wandered from the ridiculous to the sweet. Margie told us about her first job at a bakery where she burned every loaf of bread for a week. Ray talked about locking himself out of his house in his underwear, again. I hadn't laughed like that in years. Not the polite kind. Real laughter, from my gut, the kind that makes your eyes water. At some point between the tart and the second glass of wine, Margie raised her glass and said, "To Helen, for showing us that it's never too late to choose your own joy." Everyone clinked glasses. I did too. And I meant it. But even in that moment, a small part of me stayed watchful. Because I knew it wasn't over. Not really. I hadn't heard from Alina. Not directly. Not since the wedding. And something in me knew it was only a matter of time before she'd come knocking. I didn't have to wait long. It was the very next day, just after noon, when I heard the knock on the front door. Steady, not loud. Like someone who wasn't planning to leave until they were let in. I was still in my robe, coffee in hand. I looked through the frosted glass and saw her silhouette, Alina. I didn't move for a moment. Just stood there, feeling something like panic and peace swirling together. Then I opened the door. She looked exactly the same and completely different. Her hair was pinned back, her clothes neat, but her eyes were tired. She held her phone in one hand like it was a shield. "Hi, Mom," she said. I didn't say it back. I stepped aside and let her in. She walked past me into the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She paused when she noticed the bare walls. The family pictures were gone. The frames empty. I had packed them away, gently but firmly. "Where are the pictures?" she asked. I didn't answer. I gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself into the armchair slowly, carefully. Like she wasn't sure what version of me she was going to get. "I didn't come to fight," she said after a moment. "Good," I replied, calm and quiet. There was silence. Then she sighed and said, "I just don't understand what happened. One minute everything was fine, and the next you're canceling things and posting pictures of checks on Facebook. Everyone's talking about it." There it was. The concern. But not for me. For the noise. For the appearance. "You didn't ask if I was okay," I said. She blinked. "What? You didn't ask how I was. You asked about the chaos. The inconvenience. But not me." Her face twisted, defensive. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. The seating was just, it wasn't personal. It was the planner. The space." Joshua's mom said. "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "It wasn't the planner. It wasn't the space. It was a choice." She opened her mouth again, but I walked out of the room before she could speak. I went to the hallway closet and pulled out the box. I brought it back, set it down on the coffee table in front of her. She looked at it like it might explode. "What's this?" "Receipts," I said. "Everything I paid for. Every check I wrote. Every upgrade I covered." She reached forward and flipped through the envelopes and invoices. Then she found the sealed legal file. Her face changed. She read the first line, then the second, and suddenly her voice was tight. "You knew." "I do now," I said. She swallowed. Her hands trembled slightly. "You're angry because I'm not your daughter?" "No," I said louder than before. "I'm angry because I raised you. I gave you everything I had. And when the moment came for you to acknowledge me, not with money, not with a gift, just with kindness, you looked away. You let them put me by the toilet. You let them crop me out." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't stop. "I held you when you had nightmares. I worked through the flu to buy you a winter coat. I made birthday cakes from scratch even when we had nothing. And you thanked Beverly in your speech. You called her a second mother. You didn't even say my name." She buried her face in her hands. "I didn't think it mattered." "No," I said. "You didn't think of me at all." She sat in silence. I stood. "I'm not your backdrop, Alina. I'm not your bank. I'm not your apology when something goes wrong." She looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks. "What do I do now?" she whispered. I walked over and picked up the box. "These are yours now," I said. "Take them." She took the box slowly, held it against her chest like a weight she wasn't ready to carry. She paused at the door, looking at me like she was hoping for one last soft place to land. "You always said I was your whole world," she said. "You were," I said. "Now I'm finally mine." Then I closed the door. The sound echoed through the house like a bell. And for the first time I didn't flinch. After the door closed behind Alina, I stood there for a moment, hands still on the knob. I didn't feel shaky. I didn't feel regret. I felt clear. It was like my heart had been clouded for so long, and suddenly someone had wiped the glass clean. I could see myself again, not just as her mother or Thomas's widow or the dependable woman who always showed up, but as a whole person. I walked back to the kitchen, poured the rest of my coffee into the sink, and stood by the window, looking out at my little garden. The roses I'd planted the summer after Thomas died were in full bloom. Bright red and stubborn. I smiled at them. They'd survived every kind of weather just like me. The house was quiet again. Peaceful. But not in a lonely way. More like settled. I sat down at the table, opened my laptop and started typing. Not an email. Not a letter. Just thoughts. A list. A plan. Not for revenge. For something better. Something mine. I began with small things. I deleted her contact from my phone, not because I wanted to forget her, but because I couldn't stand to see her name pop up like everything was still the same. I kept the number. I just erased the label. That's how it felt now, like she was no longer my Alina. Just a woman I used to raise. Then I opened my email. There were more messages. From people at the wedding. From cousins. From distant friends who had seen the Facebook post with the check I'd uploaded. No caption. No story. Just a photo of the signed amount with my name clearly visible and everything else blurred out. That image had traveled fast. Some messages were curious. Some were upset. But most were supportive. They said things like, "This hit me so hard," or "Thank you for speaking up." One woman I hadn't spoken to since high school wrote, "I thought I was the only one who went through something like this." I didn't reply to any of them. I just read them, one by one, with a calm heart. My story, for once, was being heard. And not just heard, understood. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was full, but not in an anxious way. I got out of bed around 2 a.m. and wandered into the guest room. That old dresser in the corner, the one with the stiff drawer, was calling to me again. I opened it, not sure what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed to see the past in order to let go of it. And there it was. Another piece of paper. Folded, worn. No envelope. Just tucked between an old calendar and a packet of unused stamps. I unfolded it slowly. It was Thomas's handwriting again. Sharp and uneven. The letter was short. Dated 3 days before he died. "Margaret, if you're reading this, I guess the first letter reached you. I don't know if you opened it. I hope you did. But there's more I need to tell you. Something I couldn't carry with me. Something I should have said a long time ago." My breath caught. I kept reading. Alina wasn't just from a previous mistake. She wasn't mine. Not even by blood. Her birth mother left her at the hospital. She was terrified. 18. Alone. She asked me to help her get the baby adopted. And I couldn't. I couldn't hand her over. So I brought her to you. Lied to you. Told you she was mine. I thought if you believed she was ours, you'd love her. And you did. God, you did. You gave her everything. You were her mother in every way that mattered. I had to sit down. I know I stole the choice from you. I lied. I thought I was protecting us. I never deserved you, Helen. You raised her like she was your own, even when she wasn't anybody's. I just wanted you to know that you were the real parent. Always. I stared at the letter, hands trembling. There it was. The truth I hadn't asked for. The truth that explained everything and nothing all at once. Alina had never been mine. Not by blood. Not by adoption papers I ever saw. She had been left. And I had taken her in. Loved her. Built my whole life around her. And still she had chosen to erase me. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't crumble. I folded the letter and placed it on the kitchen table, right next to the roses I'd cut that morning. The next few days passed slowly. Quietly. I worked in the garden. I baked. I walked to the corner store and bought groceries for one. I stopped making extra portions out of habit. I turned on music, real music I liked, not the kind I thought Alina would want to hear when she visited. Then on Friday night I hosted another dinner. Same people. Same mismatched plates. This time, I made herb-roasted chicken and a peach cobbler that reminded me of my grandmother's recipe. The backyard glowed again under the fairy lights. Everyone showed up smiling, laughing. No one asked about Alina. They didn't need to. They knew. At one point, Claire, my old friend from the library who had recently reconnected with me, raised her glass and said, "To choosing yourself. To remembering that we don't owe our silence to people who only know how to take." And that toast stayed with me. After the guests left and the dishes were done, I stood in the kitchen barefoot, holding a glass of wine, and I finally let the quiet sink in. It didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like freedom. I hadn't heard from Alina again. I hadn't expected to. But part of me still braced each morning, just in case. Just in case she realized what she had done. Just in case she wanted to make it right. But she didn't. And I stopped waiting. Instead, I began thinking about something I hadn't thought about in years. What I wanted. Not for her. Not for anyone else. For me. And that's how the idea started. Not big. Not loud. Just a small, quiet question. What would it feel like to build something for myself? That's when I took out a fresh notebook. Not the kind I used for shopping lists or budget planning. A new one. Clean pages. A pen that felt nice in my hand. I began writing again. This time not about sacrifice. Not about her. About me. Things I loved. Things I hadn't done yet. Things I had let go of and might want to get back. I wrote, try pottery. And smiled at the idea of spinning clay, getting my hands messy, making something that didn't have to be perfect. I wrote, visit Asheville in the fall. I'd seen photos of the trees there, how the leaves turned fire red and gold. I wrote, join a book club that doesn't judge your taste. Page after page, I made a new life, not out of rebellion, not to prove anything to Alina, but because I deserved it. Because after all the years of being someone else's anchor, it was time to float. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for wanting more. It's strange how quickly a life can change. One day, you're standing in a kitchen stirring pasta while your daughter tells you about the wedding colors, and the next you're alone, not stirring anything, just sitting with silence, and realizing it doesn't hurt like it used to. It feels like healing. I kept writing in that notebook every day. Just little things. A memory, a thought, a recipe I wanted to try. Sometimes I'd tear out a page and throw it away. Not because it was bad, just because I didn't want to keep every word. I was letting go. Slowly. With intention. I also started walking in the evenings. Down to the river, past the old market district, where the brick streets are uneven, and you can still smell sweetgrass baskets being woven. I'd walk until the sky turned orange, and the air softened with twilight. Sometimes I'd stop at a bench, sit with a cup of tea from the little cafe near the docks, and just watch people live. It made me feel both invisible and infinite. One evening, about a week after that last dinner party, I saw my cousin Diane at the grocery store. We hadn't spoken since the wedding. She spotted me in the bakery aisle, standing in front of the sourdough, and called out my name like she wasn't sure if she should. Helen. I turned, smiled politely. Hi, Diane. She stepped closer, looked a little uncomfortable. Her voice dropped like we were sharing a secret. Are you okay? I held her gaze. Were you? She blinked fast. What do you mean? I said softly. Were you okay? Watching me sit by the restrooms beside a mop bucket at my own daughter's wedding. Her face flushed. She looked down at the floor, ashamed. I didn't realize that was on purpose. I thought, maybe you volunteered to sit there. I didn't say anything, just let the silence hang between us. Eventually she spoke again. I'm sorry, Helen. I should have said something. I should have gone to you. I nodded. Thank you. She looked relieved, like that one bit of acknowledgement had freed her from something. Maybe it had. But it hadn't freed me. Not yet. I picked up my bread and walked away. Not coldly. Just finally. Later that night, back home, I found a bouquet on my front porch. Carnations. The cheap kind you get at gas stations. Already wilting. No card. I didn't bring them inside. I dropped them straight into the trash bin. Because here's something I've learned, and I want every woman listening to me to hear it clearly. Not every apology deserves a place in your living room. Not every olive branch is worth watering. Sometimes you have to let things die to grow something new. I spent the next few days doing just that. Growing something new. I rearranged the living room. Took down the heavy curtains and let the light in. Bought a new rug, bright blue with golden lines running through it like rivers. I pulled the old photo albums out of storage and looked through them with a different lens. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just looked. Like flipping through a museum of someone else's life. Alina's face was in almost every picture. Her birthday cakes, her school plays, her graduation, and me always behind the scenes, always the one holding the camera or setting the table or fixing the crooked tiara. I took out every photo that made me feel invisible and boxed them, not out of anger, but because I needed to stop curating a history that only told one side. The next morning, I made a decision. I walked to the local print shop and asked them to scan a photo of the check I wrote for the wedding. The biggest one. $32,500 for the venue. It had my signature. My name. The date. I posted it on Facebook again. This time, I added a caption. I built the house. They locked me out. This is what silence costs. I didn't check the comments. I didn't need to. That afternoon, my phone started buzzing. I hadn't turned it on in days. But curiosity got the best of me. 42 messages. 6 missed calls. 3 voicemails. One was from Joshua's mother, Beverly. I don't know what kind of scene you're trying to create, Helen, but this is incredibly unfair. People are asking questions. This is not how family handles things. I played the voicemail twice, just to remind myself how little I owed her. Another voicemail was from Alina. Mom, I don't even know what to say anymore. This is petty. People think something's wrong with me. Please, can we just talk? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she still didn't understand. Still thought it was about being embarrassed. About public perception. She hadn't once asked how I felt. Not once. That night, I made myself dinner. Roasted garlic chicken, a spinach salad, and a glass of red wine. I sat at the table alone and lit a candle. Not for mood. Just for me. After dinner, I started writing again. This time, I didn't stop at just a list. I began drafting an invitation. Not to a wedding. Not to a holiday. Just a meal. A night. A gathering of people who had never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. I wrote down their names. Claire. Janelle. Ms. Torres. Ray. Margie. I called it dinner for the scene. I even printed the invitations on thick cardstock. No frills. Just a sunflower on the front and my handwriting on the inside. You are invited to Helen's table. No roles. No expectations. Just presents. I mailed them out the next morning with a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt since I was young. Before marriage. Before motherhood. Before I had built a life around making sure someone else's needs were always met. A few days later, I was washing dishes when a soft knock came at the door. It wasn't Alina. It was Ray, holding his invitation in one hand and a bottle of homemade lemonade in the other. I didn't want to wait, he said with a grin. Figured I'd come say thank you in person. I laughed. Let him in. We sat on the porch and drank lemonade while the wind moved gently through the trees. We didn't talk about the wedding. Or the past. Just simple things. His garden. My new rug. The way the light looked when it hit the porch railing just right. It reminded me that sometimes the most healing thing isn't grand forgiveness or big gestures. It's just someone sitting next to you, not asking you to explain your pain, but acknowledging it's there and choosing to stay anyway. And in that moment, I realized something. I had spent my whole life waiting to be invited. But now I was the one setting the table. And I finally knew who deserved a seat. I never expected peace to feel so quiet. Not silent, just still. Like the kind of quiet after a thunderstorm, when the sky is washed clean and the air feels different. That's what it felt like, sitting in my house, days after sending those invitations. No tension in my shoulders. No knot in my stomach. Just the soft hum of the fridge and the ticking of the clock above the mantel. Every day, I found something new to reclaim. My space. My time. Even my kitchen. I started cooking just for me. Not for company. Not for approval. Just for the joy of it. I tried a lemon thyme soup I saw in a magazine. It didn't turn out perfect, but I sat at the table with it anyway and told myself, this is good. You made this. For you. I was learning to exist without waiting. Without hoping for a thank you or an apology or even a call. But the world has its own timing. And just when I'd finally settled into the rhythm of this new life, it came again, a knock at the door. It was late afternoon. I was barefoot sipping tea, my book still open beside me when I saw the shadow through the glass. It was Alina. I don't know how I knew. Maybe it was the way the knock paused in between beats, hesitant. Like someone testing the waters. I stood still. I could have walked away. Could have ignored it. But I didn't. I opened the door. There she was. My daughter. The girl I had raised, carried, defended. Her hair was up, messy like she hadn't slept. Her eyes swollen. No makeup. No mask. Hi, she said, her voice small. I didn't say it back. I stepped aside. She walked in like she didn't recognize the place. Like my house had become something new. She looked around at the bare mantel, the blue rug, the empty picture frames on the floor waiting to be packed. Where are the photos? She asked, not looking at me. I didn't answer. I walked past her and sat in my armchair. She followed and sat across from me, clutching her purse like a lifeline. I saw the post, she said. Everyone's seen it. I nodded once. I know. She swallowed hard. They're saying things. About me. About Joshua. That we used you. That we humiliated you. You did, I said calmly. So they're not wrong. Her face crumbled. I didn't think it would. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. It's not bad, I said, voice even. It's honest. She stared at the floor, quiet. I watched her shoulders rise and fall with each breath. The weight of guilt looks different on people. Some wear it like a badge. Some try to hide it behind words. Then she looked at me and said something I didn't expect. I read the letter. I didn't move. I went to the courthouse, she continued. Requested the full file. I needed to see it for myself. I waited. I know I'm not your biological daughter, she whispered. I nodded slowly. That's never been a secret to me. She looked up, confused. But the letter said. I raised you knowing you weren't mine, I said. Thomas lied. But once you were in my arms, that was it. You were mine. You didn't need to be blood. Tears welled in her eyes again. Why didn't you tell me? Because love doesn't need a resume, I said. I chose you. Every day. Even when you didn't choose me back. She broke then. Completely. Her face crumpled, and she started crying, not the pretty kind of crying, the real kind. The kind you can't control. I was wrong, Mom. About everything. About the wedding. About how I treated you. I was so wrapped up in trying to make everything perfect that I forgot the one person who made everything possible. I didn't speak. I let her cry. I wanted to make a statement. I thought I was stepping into something bigger. And I didn't even see how I was stepping over you to get there. I sat still. Let the silence do the talking. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out something. A framed picture. It was us, taken when she was 8. I was holding her on my lap, both of us grinning, her missing teeth and my tired eyes. I found this in one of the boxes, she said. I took it from the storage unit after I realized you'd packed everything away. She held it out to me. I took it gently, looked at it, smiled, but only just. Do you want it back? She asked. I set it on the side table. Not yet. She nodded, eyes down. I understand. Then she stood. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. And I'm not asking for it right now. I wanted to say thank you. For everything. For raising me. For never walking away, even when I gave you every reason to. She turned toward the door. Before she left, I asked, did you come because you miss me? Or because people are starting to talk? She stopped. Turned back. I came because I realized I forgot the difference between love and performance. You never asked me to perform. You just loved me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw it. Not the bride. Not the polished daughter. Just a young woman flawed and trying. I'm not angry anymore, I said. But I'm still hurt. She nodded, biting her lip. Okay. Then she left. And I didn't chase after her. I sat there for a long time, looking at that photo. Not with nostalgia. Not with longing. But with respect for the woman I was then. For the version of me that had carried so much alone and still smiled. That night I cooked again. Something simple, chili with cornbread. I set one place at the table. No candles. No music. Just me. Halfway through dinner, I raised my glass, not to the past. Not to the apology. But to the fact that I could sit in my own home and not feel empty. I'd spent so many years making room for others that I forgot what it was like to occupy my space fully. Now I was learning. The next morning, the sun came through the kitchen window like it was meant for me. I brewed my coffee, flipped through my notebook, and smiled at a new line I had added. You are not an extra in your own life. And for the first time in decades, I truly believed it. It's funny how long it takes to learn that you're allowed to take up space. I spent years being small, being quiet, making sure everyone else had what they needed, and telling myself that was love. That was my job. I thought motherhood meant becoming invisible. But it doesn't. Or at least, it shouldn't. The week after Alina came to my house, I kept waiting to feel something big. Relief, regret, maybe even a wave of forgiveness. But it didn't come like that. It came slow. In pieces. In little acts of reclaiming my life. A drawer organized. A corner of the porch swept. A meal made exactly the way I liked it, with no adjustments for anyone else's preferences. That was healing, not dramatic but real. I didn't call her. She didn't call me. And I was okay with that. Not because I didn't love her. I did. I do. But because loving someone doesn't mean letting them harm you. I had given her everything I had. And when she had the chance to stand beside me, she chose to stand in front of everyone else. I kept walking each evening. Past the same rose garden. Down the same crooked sidewalks. I passed people I didn't know, couples holding hands, teenagers yelling into their phones. I smiled more. I spoke to strangers. I had spent so long looking down that I forgot what it was like to look around. Then came the night of my dinner. Not for an event, not for a milestone. Just a gathering. Just mine. The invitations had all been accepted with handwritten notes, or short phone calls that meant more than they probably knew. Claire brought wine again. Ray brought his lemon bars. Ms. Torres brought a book she thought I'd love. Janelle showed up with her favorite candle and a grin so wide it made me laugh the second I saw her. Margie wore a scarf she said reminded her of joy. They hugged me. They smelled like lavender and laughter and memories that were mine to keep. We sat around the table in my backyard under those same string lights, plates full of roasted chicken, sweet potatoes, and fresh salad from the market. Someone played music from their phone, soft, nothing dramatic, and the whole evening felt like one long exhale. After dessert, Claire raised her glass. She always does. To Helen, she said, eyes shining. For being the kind of woman who reminds us that you don't have to be invited to sit at the head of your own table. Glasses clinked, softly at first, then louder. I smiled, not out of politeness, but because it felt natural. I want to say something, I said, surprising even myself. They all looked at me, quiet and warm. To the women who stayed quiet for too long, I began. To the ones who gave more than they had and got less than they deserved. To the mothers who made a home and were asked to wait outside of it. To the women who built the house, cooked the food, paid the bills, and were still told they didn't belong in the photo. This is for us. Another toast. Another round of clinks. But this time they didn't cheer. They just nodded. They understood. Later, after everyone had left and the dishes were done, I stood in the kitchen barefoot, holding the same wine glass, watching the flicker of the last candle before it went out. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Content. Not happy in the performative way. Not successful by anyone else's measure. Just whole. Just me. Alina never called again after that visit. And I didn't chase her. Not because I was angry, but because I was done begging to be seen. I had tried. I had shown her the truth. And she had to decide what to do with it. Sometimes love looks like showing up again and again. And sometimes love looks like walking away before you lose yourself completely. I chose the latter. And it wasn't easy. But it was right. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. It was from Thomas's sister. We hadn't spoken in years. Inside was a single photograph, me holding baby Alina in the hospital. My eyes looked terrified, but my hands were steady. On the back, she'd written, "You were her mother from day one. Blood never made that true, you did." I framed it and placed it by the window. Not as a shrine, not as a reminder of loss, but as proof. Of who I was. Of what I did. Of the strength it took to love so deeply and still let go. The roses outside bloomed again. Taller this time. Wilder. I let them grow however they wanted. No pruning. No rules. Just life, messy and beautiful. People ask me sometimes now, neighbors, old friends who heard bits and pieces, how I could walk away from my own daughter. I don't correct them. I didn't walk away from her. I walked toward myself. That's what they don't understand. You can give someone everything and still be disposable. You can build a world and still be left out of the story. But you can also choose to stop writing for someone else and start writing for yourself. I picked up my notebook again last night. The same one where I wrote things like try pottery and visit Asheville. I flipped through the pages, and they didn't feel like dreams anymore. They felt like plans. I added one more line. Start a Sunday supper. No occasion needed. And I meant it. Because I know now that my table doesn't need to be fancy. My house doesn't need to be spotless. My story doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be mine. So here I am, Helen Monroe. 58. School librarian turned storyteller. Mother. Woman. Whole person. No longer the one waiting behind the swinging door. No longer the checkbook. No longer the silence. I am the woman who stood beside a toilet at the wedding she paid for, then stood up and walked out. I am the woman who stopped making room for people who wouldn't even save her a seat. I am the woman who set her own table and filled it with people who saw her. And I promise you this, I will never sit quietly in the back again. Not unless I choose to. Not unless the view is worth it.